At the company's Christmas party on the hotel rooftop, my husband gave his mistress a 3-carat $18,000 diamond ring in front of 200 people. The gift I received after 22 years of marriage, a pair of $6.99 wool gloves, still with the discount sticker wrapped in old newspaper. You know why? He whispered in my ear. I smiled, thanked him, and took them. But before that, I had placed a gold envelope under the Christmas tree at home. The next morning, when he found and read it, it was all too late. Thank you for being here with me. Before we begin, drop a quick comment and tell me, is it morning, afternoon, or late night where you are? I read every comment, and your voice adds something to this space. Just a quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling and reflection. What matters most is the message it carries. The applause started before I had time to look away. My husband opened the velvet box and 200 people filled the Langham, Chicago rooftop with the sound of people who had decided collectively to call something beautiful. The ring caught the chandelier light. 3 carats. Platinum band. $18,000 charged to a credit card in my name while I was at the dentist and he was on Michigan Avenue selecting proof of everything I already knew. Daria Sutton accepted it the way she accepted everything Roland offered, as though she had simply been waiting for the world to catch up to what she deserved. She slid it onto her finger while shareholders and board members clapped, and I stood near the bar with a wine glass I had not touched and watched my husband's face in the moment he believed he had won. That face. I had been studying it for 18 months. The way his chin lifted slightly, the way his shoulders settled, the particular ease of a man who has confused dominance for safety and has stopped watching for threats because he believes he has already neutralized the only one that mattered. He hadn't. I watched him cross the ballroom toward me, and I felt nothing but the cold, clean clarity of someone who has been ready for a very long time. He reached beneath the lowest branch of the Christmas tree and produced a package wrapped in newspaper, the Chicago Tribune real estate section. No ribbon, no bow. He handed it to me in front of everyone with the expression of a man performing the final act of something he had been rehearsing for months. Inside 1 pair of knit gloves, $6.99, the red clearance sticker still attached. The ballroom went quiet the way rooms go quiet when 200 people suddenly understand that they are witnesses to something they will spend years pretending they did not see. Roland leaned close. His breath was warm and certain against my ear. "You know why, don't you?" he whispered. I did know why, and I smiled. Not from gratitude, not from confusion, from the specific satisfaction of holding $6.99 in my hands, while knowing that by this time tomorrow, everything he believed he owned would already be gone. I kissed his cheek, set the gloves in my purse, finished my wine. Somewhere across the city, a golden envelope was waiting under our Christmas tree. He just didn't know it yet. 18 months began with a prescription bottle. Dr. Edgar Whitfield, 61. Our family physician for 20 years sat across from me in his Lincoln Park office with an expression I had never seen on his face before, genuine fear for my safety. It was June 2024. Afternoon light filtered through Venetian blinds, casting lines across his mahogany desk. He slid the prescription across that desk with the kind of careful silence that told me everything I needed to know before he spoke a single word. "Your husband called last week," he said. "He was concerned about your blood pressure medication. Said you'd been forgetting doses, getting confused about the timing. He asked me to adjust it." I looked at the prescription. The dosage had been raised. Significantly. "Edgar," I said quietly, "my blood pressure is 120/75. It has been 120/75 for the last 6 years." "I know," he said. We sat in silence while the air conditioning hummed, and somewhere down the hall a phone rang twice and stopped. "There's a second medication here," I said, reading the paper. "I don't recognize the name." "It's a proprietary compound," Dr. Whitfield said. His hands were folded on the desk knuckles white. "Developed for patients with severe anxiety and hypertension. It's effective. It's also, when combined with the elevated dosage of your primary medication, known to cause progressive memory impairment. The words settled between us like stones dropping into still water. "How progressive?" I asked. "If you take this medication exactly as prescribed for 6 months," he said, meeting my eyes, "you will no longer be capable of signing any legal documents. The cognitive decline would be gradual enough that most people wouldn't notice until it was too late to reverse." I set the prescription down very carefully. My hands did not shake. That surprised me. "How long have you known my husband, Edgar?" 20 years, he said, "and I have never been more ashamed to call him a patient. Can you prove intent?" "No," he admitted. He could claim he was genuinely concerned about your health, that he simply wanted the best care, that I'm the one who prescribed something inappropriate. "But you didn't prescribe this." "No," he said, "I did not, and I never will. But to understand what happened that afternoon in Edgar's office, you need to know what I did not do. I did not cry. I did not rage. I did not call my husband and scream or hire a lawyer and file. I simply asked one question. If I wanted to pretend to take this medication, I said, how would I make it convincing?" Dr. Whitfield looked at me for a long moment. Then he pulled out a second prescription pad and began writing. "Mild forgetfulness," he said as he wrote. "Misplaced items. Repeated questions. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would trigger immediate medical intervention. Just enough to make people wonder if you're starting to slip." I took the list he handed me. 12 symptoms, each one carefully calibrated to suggest decline without proving disability. "How long would I need to maintain this?" I asked. "If your husband is planning what I think he's planning," Dr. Whitfield said quietly, "he'll need at least 6 months of documented incompetence to petition for medical power of attorney, which means you have 6 months to decide what you're going to do about it." I folded the list and placed it in my purse next to the prescription I would never fill. "Thank you, Edgar," I said. "This conversation stays between us." "Of course," he said. "But Lenore, be careful. If he's willing to do this, there's no limit to what else he might do." I drove home that day, cooked dinner as usual, poured wine for my husband, smiled as he told me about the company. And in my head, the trap had already begun. 6 months later, I started leaving my keys in the refrigerator. 9 months later, I asked my daughter the same question 3 times in one phone call. 12 months later, I stood in the garden looking confused about where I had planted roses I could see with perfect clarity. 18 months later, I stood in my living room on Christmas Eve at 11:45 p.m., holding a golden manila envelope. The house was dark. Roland had gone to bed an hour ago, satisfied with his performance at the party, confident in his dominance, certain I was too far gone to recognize humiliation when it was wrapped in newspaper. The Christmas tree stood 3 meters tall in the corner, its lights blinking red and gold in the darkness. I had decorated it myself 3 weeks ago while Roland was at the office and Thane was meeting with contractors. White lights, gold ornaments, silver tinsel, beautiful and empty like everything in this house had become. I walked to the tree and knelt where I had knelt that morning, wrapping gifts for the staff. The carpet was soft under my knees. The lights blinked red gold, reflecting off the envelope like something alive. Inside the envelope, 7 pages, 43 specific actions, each one timed to the minute. Monday, 9 a.m., notice of emergency board meeting filed with corporate secretary. Monday, 10 a.m., forensic audit of company accounts initiated by external firm. Tuesday, 10:15 a.m., meeting with Conrad Morgan, corporate attorney, to discuss Section 14 activation. Every step documented. Every consequence calculated. 18 months of watching my husband believe I was losing my mind while I was actually building the cage that would hold him. The Christmas tree lights blinked red and gold in the darkness, reflecting off the envelope like something alive, like the heart I had stopped listening to the day I learned my husband wanted me erased. I placed the envelope in the exact spot where I had stood receiving those socks hours earlier, between the porcelain nativity scene and the antique wooden train my son had played with as a child. I arranged it so Roland would see it immediately when he came downstairs tomorrow morning. The golden paper would catch the light. He would be curious. He would open it. And by the time he finished reading page 1, it would already be too late. I stood brushed carpet lint from my knees and looked at the tree one last time. It was beautiful. I had made it beautiful, just like I had made this company beautiful 22 years ago when it was drowning in debt, and I was the one who saved it. I turned off the living room lights and walked up the stairs to the bedroom where my husband was already asleep. 18 months of planning, 43 actions, 7 pages of legal precision, and now it was just a matter of waiting for him to wake up and find it. He found the envelope at 7:23 a.m. on Christmas morning. I heard him walk downstairs, heard the silence that meant he was reading, heard nothing after that. But I am getting ahead of myself. There was a version of Roland I loved once before power taught him to mistake my quietness for weakness and my competence for a threat. Winter 2003, 22 years ago. I was 38 years old, the youngest CFO in Midwest commercial real estate, sitting in a Wicker Park co-working space with IKEA furniture and snow, falling past windows that rattled when trucks passed. Ashford Realty Group, named after Roland's father, who had founded it 30 years prior, was 6 months from bankruptcy. $300,000 underwater, creditors circling. The kind of trouble that ends careers and marriages simultaneously. 7 creditors sat around a folding table looking at my husband like he was already dead. Roland stood at the head of that table, 40 years old, silver, just beginning at his temples, wearing the confidence of a man who had inherited something he never built. He looked at the creditors, then at me, then back at them. "My wife will present our restructuring proposal," he said. "She built this plan. I trust her completely." And he sat down. I stood up. For the next 47 minutes, I walked those creditors through a financial rescue architecture so precise that by the time I finished, 2 of them were taking notes: debt consolidation, asset reallocation. A 3-year revenue timeline based on market analysis I had compiled over 6 months of working until midnight while Roland networked at charity dinners. I saved that company, not Roland, me. When the meeting ended, the head creditor shook my hand and said, "Mrs. Ashford, if you ever get tired of saving your husband's company, I know 6 firms that would hire you tomorrow." Roland waited until we were alone in the parking lot, snow settling on the shoulders of his wool coat. Then he pulled me close and kissed my forehead. "You're a genius, Lenore," he said. "I genuinely don't know what I would do without you." I believed him. That was the only mistake I made in 22 years, believing that gratitude and love were the same thing. I need you to understand the woman Roland married in 2001 was not weak. She was brilliant. She was essential. And that was precisely what he could not forgive. Because when a man builds his empire on his wife's intelligence, every day she exists becomes a reminder that he is not self-made. Every time someone thanks her instead of him, every time a board member asks for her opinion before his, every small moment of her visibility becomes evidence of his inadequacy. And eventually the man who once kissed her forehead and called her a genius begins to believe that her competence is an insult designed specifically to humiliate him. I did not see it happening, not at first. The shift was gradual, like watching someone age you do not notice until you compare photographs years apart and realize the person standing before you is no longer the person you married. The first time I saw it clearly was a Sunday dinner in 2022, 3 years before the Christmas party, 3 years before the envelope. Just family around the dining room table in our Lincoln Park villa, Roland and me, our son Thane at 25, and my youngest daughter, Saskia, 23, then sitting at the far end with her law school textbook stacked beside her plate, silent and observant in the way that made her entire family underestimate her. Thane was presenting a resort expansion plan in Florida, excited, confident. He had his father's certainty without his father's experience, which made him dangerous in ways Roland used to understand before he started seeing that same certainty as hereditary proof of his own brilliance. I listened to my son talk about occupancy rates and revenue projections for 15 minutes. Then I asked a question. "The projections look promising," I said carefully. "But have you accounted for seasonal occupancy variance and the hurricane insurance premium increase in that region?" Simple question. Standard due diligence. The kind of question I had been asking for 22 years that had saved the company millions. Thane stopped mid-sentence, looked at his father, waited. Roland set down his fork with deliberate precision. The sound of silver on china was very loud in the sudden quiet. "Lenore," he said, voice flat and cold. "I think our son knows what he's doing. He doesn't need you to second-guess him at the dinner table." The silence that followed was not the silence of people thinking. It was the silence of people choosing where to look that was not at me. Again. Thane smiled, not warmly, just smiled. I looked down at my plate and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would not make it worse. I had asked a legitimate question. I had been dismissed like a child interrupting adult conversation, and everyone at that table was going to pretend it was normal. That dinner was 3 years ago. By the time I understood what I had witnessed, it was already too late to pretend I hadn't. But my youngest daughter, Saskia, 26, now but 23, then she had seen it. I watched her look down at her plate that evening, her hands folded carefully in her lap, her face betraying nothing. Law school had taught her to control her expressions. Life in this family had taught her when to be invisible. She did not look at me, did not speak, just sat there with her contracts textbook open to a chapter on fiduciary duty, while her father publicly humiliated her mother, and her brother learned that cruelty was an acceptable response to competence. I thought she sees it all. She always sees it all. What I did not know then was that she had been waiting for me to see it too, that she had been watching the pattern for years, watching her father dismiss her mother, watching her brother inherit that dismissal, watching power calcify into contempt. She had been waiting for the moment I would stop pretending it was normal. And when I finally called her at 1 o'clock in the morning 18 months ago, the night I drove home from Dr. Whitfield's office with a prescription for cognitive decline in my purse and rage in my throat, I could not swallow. She answered on the first ring as though she had been waiting by the phone. "Mom." One word. Just my daughter's voice at 1 o'clock in the morning, alert and waiting like she had been sitting by the phone, expecting this exact call at this exact hour. I was in my private office on the second floor of our Lincoln Park villa. The house was dark. Roland had been asleep for 2 hours. I had been sitting at my desk since midnight with Dr. Whitfield's prescription in front of me and my phone in my hand, trying to decide if I was brave enough to make this call. "Saskia," I said. "I need to tell you something. Your father is trying to make me mentally incompetent. The doctor showed me the prescription today." Silence on the other end. Not shocked silence. Not confused silence. Just the silence of someone processing information they had already suspected. "Then tell me everything." For the next 11 minutes, I told her about Dr. Whitfield's office, the altered medication, the 6-month timeline to legal incompetence, the 15% of Ashford Realty shares. I held that Roland needed me unable to control. When I finished, Saskia was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Saskia, I'm here," she said. Her voice had changed. Gone was the careful daughter who had learned to be invisible at family dinners. This voice was sharp and cold and absolutely certain. "Mom, I need you to do exactly what I say starting tomorrow morning. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said, because what else could I say? "Good. Tomorrow you start pretending the medication is working. Not dramatically, just small things. Forget where you put your keys. Ask the same question twice. Nothing that would trigger immediate medical intervention. Just enough to make him believe it's happening." "For how long?" 18 months, she said. "That's how long it will take to build what we need. Evidence, documentation, legal architecture. We're going to let him think he's winning while we're actually building the cage." I listened to my 25-year-old daughter, the one Roland called the useless one, because she chose law school over the family business, lay out an 18-month strategic campaign with the precision of a general planning a war. She told me about share acquisitions I would need to make quietly, about Section 14 of the corporate charter I had written in 2003 that allowed emergency removal of officers for malfeasance, about forensic accountants and legal timelines and the exact sequence of moves that would need to happen to strip Roland of everything before he understood he had lost. I took notes for 47 minutes while my youngest daughter transformed from dismissed child to architect of her father's destruction. I want you to understand what happened in that 47-minute phone call. I became my daughter's student, and she became my general. Everything I had built, every piece of intelligence I had about the company, every relationship I had cultivated over 22 years, it all became raw material for a plan she designed with the cold precision of someone who had been waiting her entire life to be asked what she was capable of. When she finished, I said, "How long have you known something was wrong?" 3 years, she said. "Since that dinner when he told you to stop questioning Thane. I started watching after that, really watching. And Mom, it's bad. Worse than the medication. There are things happening at the company you don't know about yet. Tell me." "Not tonight," she said. "Tonight you just need to know we have 18 months, and at the end of it, he loses everything. But only if you can pretend to be exactly what he wants you to be. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. "Then tomorrow morning start forgetting things." 3 weeks later, I stood in our kitchen in bright July sunlight with the smell of coffee filling the room and deliberately dropped my car keys on the granite counter. Roland was reading the Tribune business section coffee cup in hand tie, already knotted for the day. I picked up the keys, set them down, picked them up again, stared at them like I'd forgotten what they were for. "Honey," I said, voice just slightly uncertain. "What day is it today? I thought I had a board meeting, but I can't remember if that was yesterday or—" I let the sentence trail off, let my face show just a flicker of confusion. Roland looked up from his newspaper. That morning in the kitchen was the first time I understood what it means to perform your own disappearance while standing perfectly still. His expression shifted. I watched it happen in real time, the flash of concern crossing his face too quickly replaced by something else. Something satisfied, something hungry. He stood, walked to me, placed his hand on my shoulder. The gesture would have looked tender to anyone watching, but I felt the weight of it, the assessment. "It's Wednesday, dear," he said, voice carefully gentle. "Are you feeling all right?" "Wednesday." I repeated like I was trying to remember. "Of course, Wednesday. I'm sorry, I didn't sleep well." "Maybe you should see Edgar again," Roland said. "Make sure the new medication is working properly." The new medication I was not taking. The medication I flushed down the toilet the day Dr. Whitfield gave me the prescription. The medication Roland believed was slowly erasing my competence day by day. "Maybe," I said. "Yes, I'll call him." Roland squeezed my shoulder, proud, satisfied, already imagining the moment I would be too confused to sign my own name, and went back to his newspaper. I stood at the counter holding my car keys, and in my head I counted day 1. He wasn't worried. He was checking to see if the pills he thought I was taking were finally working, checking to see if I was becoming exactly what he needed me to become: incompetent, unreliable, disposable. I acted that charade for 547 days. Every morning I dropped something, forgot something, asked something I already knew. And every day Roland believed a little more, watched a little closer, grew a little more satisfied. That is the only thing he has ever been truly good at believing, exactly what he wants to believe. But while I was performing confusion in the kitchen, someone else was watching from the shadows, someone Roland had spent 15 years dismissing as irrelevant, someone who had been gathering evidence long before I ever called my daughter at 1 a.m. That someone was Conrad Morgan. Conrad Morgan, 47. Roland's corporate attorney, and the man my husband had spent 15 years treating like expensive furniture, necessary but unremarkable, present but invisible. October 2024, 14 months before the Christmas party, the Ashford Realty boardroom on the 22nd floor, windows overlooking the Chicago River, late afternoon light, making the mahogany table glow like it was on fire. Roland called his own lawyer a burden on the corporation in front of 12 board members, and I watched Conrad's face go absolutely still. Conrad had been presenting a quarterly legal compliance report. Routine, necessary, the kind of presentation he had been giving for 15 years without incident. He was explaining a regulatory change that would affect our commercial properties when Roland cut him off mid-sentence. Conrad Roland said, voice sharp enough that the entire boardroom went quiet. "I think we've heard enough. Your department has been underperforming for 3 consecutive quarters." Conrad stopped speaking, set down his presentation notes carefully. "Underperforming," Conrad said, voice neutral. "The legal department has successfully defended 7... I'm not interested in excuses." Roland interrupted. He looked around the table at 12 board members who had suddenly found their coffee cups fascinating. "My attorney has been a burden on this corporation for 15 years. Perhaps it's time we discussed early retirement options." The silence that followed was not shock. It was the silence of people who had seen Roland do this before to other people and were grateful it was not happening to them. Conrad did not flinch, did not protest. He simply closed his folder and sat down. His hands stayed perfectly steady. His expression remained completely neutral. But I saw it. That stillness was more dangerous than any anger. I sat across the table performing my confusion act. I had dropped my pen twice during the meeting and asked someone to repeat a financial figure I had calculated in my head before they finished speaking. But I was watching Conrad with absolute clarity. And I thought, he is not surprised. He is not hurt. He is simply waiting. The meeting ended at 6:45 p.m. Board members left quickly, avoiding eye contact with Conrad on their way out. Roland stayed behind, making phone calls, master of his domain, satisfied with his performance. I gathered my things slowly, pretending to be confused about which folder was mine, and left at 6:58 p.m. Conrad was waiting by the elevators. "I know what you're doing, Lenore," he said without preamble. "No greeting, no small talk. And I know what Roland is doing. I have a hard drive." I stopped walking, looked at him carefully. This quiet man who had sat through meeting after meeting, being dismissed, ignored, treated as furniture. "How long?" I asked. 14 months, he said. 14 months. August 2023. 2 months before Dr. Whitfield showed me that prescription. 2 months before I knew I needed to fight back. Conrad had been gathering evidence before I even knew there was a war. I want you to understand something about people who are chronically underestimated. They see everything precisely because no one bothers to hide anything from them. Roland had spent 15 years discussing strategy, finances, and plans in front of Conrad like he was a piece of office equipment. And Conrad had been listening, watching, recording. "What's on the hard drive?" I asked. Everything Conrad said. Financial irregularities, emails between Roland and Daria going back 3 years, evidence of embezzlement, evidence of the medication plot. Roland was careless in emails to Daria about your deteriorating condition. He documented his own crime because he never believed anyone would be looking. "Why tell me now?" Conrad looked at me for a long moment. We were alone in the hallway. The cleaning crew had not arrived yet. The floor was empty except for us, and the sound of the ventilation system humming. "Because today is the first time I've seen you truly ready," he said. "I've been watching you pretend to forget things for months, watching you perform confusion. At first I thought you were actually declining. Then I realized you're playing the same game I am. You're letting them underestimate you while you're building something they can't see. What do you want from this?" I asked. He smiled then, not warmly, just a small movement of his mouth that looked like satisfaction. "I want to watch him lose everything," Conrad said. "I don't want money, I don't want credit. I just want to be in the room when he realizes that the people he dismissed as irrelevant were the ones who destroyed him." We did not shake hands. We did not make promises. We simply nodded two people who had been made invisible by the same man who had both decided that invisibility was the perfect weapon. The sound of our footsteps going in opposite directions down that empty hallway was the sound of Roland's empire beginning to crack from the inside. Conrad walked toward the north elevators. I walked toward the south. We would not speak again until the night before the Christmas party, when he would call me at 11 p.m. to confirm that everything was ready, that the evidence was compiled, that the timeline was set. But that night in October, we just walked away from each other carrying our separate pieces of Roland's destruction. I did not know then that Conrad's hard drive would become the final piece of evidence we needed. What I did know was this: my husband had spent 15 years publicly humiliating his own attorney, believing that legal expertise could be replaced as easily as office furniture. And he had been creating the most dangerous kind of enemy, the patient kind, the kind who had been gathering evidence in complete silence for 14 months before I even knew I needed allies, the kind who had been waiting in the shadows for much longer than Roland could possibly imagine. But 18 months of building alliances in shadows ends the moment light hits the envelope. Roland came down the stairs at 9:30 on Saturday morning with the loose, satisfied posture of a man who had just executed a perfect plan. I sat at our kitchen table with coffee I had made at 6:15 when I woke from sleep that had lasted exactly 3 hours and 42 minutes. I had not slept well, but not from fear, from anticipation, from the electric current of knowing that in approximately 1 hour and 17 minutes, my husband would walk into the living room and his entire world would change. He poured coffee into his favorite mug, the one that said "World's Best Dad" that Thane had given him 12 years ago, and leaned against the counter with his phone already in his hand. "Are you feeling all right this morning?" he asked, voice casual but studied, false concern wrapped in the tone of someone checking to see if yesterday's humiliation had achieved its intended effect. "I know last night was difficult." I looked up from my coffee, met his eyes with the perfect amount of confused fatigue. "Just tired, darling," I said. "It was a long evening." "Yes," he said, scrolling through his phone, already losing interest in me now that the performance of concern was complete. "Well, I think it went rather well overall, don't you?" He was reading congratulatory messages from party guests. I could see his expression, that small, satisfied smile men get when they believe they have successfully dominated a room. He thought last night had been a triumph. The expensive watch for Daria, the clearance socks for me, 200 witnesses to his power and my irrelevance. He genuinely believed it had worked. That was the moment I understood how completely he had been living in a different reality than mine for the past 18 months. While I had been building a legal architecture of his destruction with Saskia and Conrad, he had been watching me drop keys and forget appointments and asking the same questions twice, and he had been seeing exactly what he wanted to see, proof that his plan was working, that the medication was erasing me day by day, that I was becoming the incompetent wife he needed me to be. He had no idea that every forgotten key, every repeated question, every moment of practice confusion had been a brick in the wall I was building around him. "The coffee's fresh," I said, because that was what the confused wife would say. Normal, domestic, irrelevant. "Thank you," he said, not looking up. He stood there for another 11 minutes, scrolling through messages, occasionally smiling, completely at ease. At 9:41 a.m., he kissed the top of my head, an absent gesture the way you pat a dog, and walked toward the living room saying something about checking the stock market before his tennis game at noon. I heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor, heard him pause near the Christmas tree. Then I heard paper tearing. 10:47 a.m. exactly. I know because I was watching the kitchen clock. Then silence. 4 minutes and 23 seconds is a very long time to sit in complete silence when you are reading the precise architecture of your own destruction. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee cooling in my hands and I counted. Every single second. I heard nothing from the living room, no phone calls, no pacing, no shouting. Just the devastating silence of a man reading 7 pages of legal timeline and understanding perhaps for the first time in 18 months that the woman he thought he had incapacitated could see him with perfect clarity. Page 1 would have told him about the emergency board meeting scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. Page 2 would have detailed the forensic audit I had initiated 3 weeks ago through an external firm he did not know I had hired. Page 3 would have explained Section 14 of the corporate charter, the clause I had written 22 years ago that allowed for immediate removal of officers for malfeasance, the clause he had never bothered to read because he assumed the woman who wrote it was too incompetent to use it. Pages 4 through 7 would have listed every transaction, every email, every piece of evidence Conrad and Saskia and I had compiled over 18 months, while he watched me pretend to lose my mind. I want you to understand what that silence meant. It was the sound of a man realizing that the woman he thought he had made invisible could see him perfectly clearly, that she had been watching him the entire time, that every moment he spent believing he was winning, she had been building the cage. At 10:51 a.m. and 23 seconds, I heard footsteps. Roland walked into the kitchen holding that envelope like it was evidence at his own trial. His face had gone from satisfied pink to ash gray. The phone was no longer in his hand. The coffee mug was abandoned somewhere in the living room. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Lenore," he said. My name sounded different in his mouth now. Not dismissive, not casual, careful, almost afraid. "What is this?" I looked at him, really looked at him. This man I had loved once. This man who had kissed my forehead and called me a genius when I saved his company. This man who had decided that my competence was a threat and my existence was an obstacle, and my mind was something that could be chemically erased to make his life more convenient. I lifted my coffee cup to my lips. My hand did not shake, not even slightly. "I think you can read Roland," I said. His hands tightened on the envelope, 7 pages crumpling slightly in his grip. "This says," he started, stopped, started again. "This says you've called an emergency board meeting. This says you've initiated a forensic audit. This says—" "Yes," I said calmly. "It says exactly what it says." I did not look away. I simply lifted my coffee cup to my lips, my hand not shaking at all, and thought, now he knows. Now he finally understands that the woman sitting across from him is not the woman he thought he married, is not the woman he thought he had made disappear. But what Roland read in that envelope was only the surface. He did not yet know about the son who had betrayed me first. The son had been the first domino, but Roland was still reading the timeline, still discovering the surface. His voice changed with every line he read from that envelope, calm at first, then confused, then something very close to genuine fear. Monday, 9:00 a.m. He read aloud, hands shaking slightly now. "Banks freeze personal accounts pending fraud investigation. Monday, 10 o'clock, tax inspection arrives at corporate headquarters. Tuesday, 10:15, divorce petition served at shareholders' meeting." He looked up at me, the envelope crumpled in his grip. "Lenore," he said. My name again, still careful, still afraid. "What is this?" I set my coffee cup down with deliberate precision, looked at him directly. "I think the words are clear enough, Roland. This is—" He looked back at the papers. "This says you've initiated forensic audits. This says you've activated some corporate charter clause. This says—" He stopped. I watched understanding move across his face like weather. "You've been pretending," he said slowly. "This whole time, the confusion, the memory lapses, every single day," I said. "There is a specific kind of silence that happens when someone realizes they have been performing for an audience that saw through every line. That silence tastes like ash." "The medication," he said. "You never took it." "No." "Edgar Dr. Whitfield, he told you. 18 months ago," I said. "The day you tried to make me mentally incompetent so you could steal my shares and give them to your mistress." The word hung in the kitchen. Mistress. I had never said it aloud before, had never given it that power. But now, watching my husband's face drain of color, I understood that naming things accurately is its own form of violence. "I don't," he started. "Yes, you do," I said. "You know exactly what you did. You know exactly what I know. And now you know that I have been 3 steps ahead of you for 18 months. He looked at the envelope, at me, at the envelope again. "What happens Monday?" he asked, voice small. "Read page 4, I said. He did not read page 4. He set the envelope on the counter like it was contaminated and walked out of the kitchen. I heard his footsteps going upstairs, heard a door close. I sat alone in the kitchen and thought about betrayal, about how it accumulates, about how the husband's affair was bad but survivable. The medication plot was worse, but still explicable greed, lust, weakness. But the son was different. December 2024, 12 months before the Christmas party, 11:45 p.m. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my phone rang. Saskia, again. Third time in a month she had called late at night with pieces of the puzzle. But this time her voice was different, flat. The kind of flat that signals catastrophe before words form. "Mom," she said, "I found the person behind the phantom companies." Phantom companies. We had discovered them 3 months earlier, shell corporations bleeding money from Ashford Realty through fake vendor contracts. Saskia had been tracking the money following digital breadcrumbs through offshore accounts and fabricated invoices. "Who?" I asked. Long pause. I heard her breathing on the other end of the line. "It's Thane," she said, 6 words. "Your son, my brother." I did not respond, could not. The silence stretched so long Saskia said my name twice to make sure I was still there. "Mom, I'm here," I said, voice steady, hands not steady. "He's been embezzling for 14 months. Saskia continued words precise and cold, like she was reading a legal brief instead of explaining how her brother had stolen from his own family. Phantom companies with fake vendor contracts. Nearly $3 million. I have the documentation. The betrayal of a spouse you can understand. Greed, lust, midlife crisis, all explicable within the framework of human weakness. But the betrayal of the child you carried, that is a different species of grief entirely. I thought of Thane at 3 years old learning to ride a bicycle in Lincoln Park. At 7, asking me to help with his math homework. At 15, telling me about the girl he liked. At 23, when I made him vice president of development because I believed in his potential. At 27, stealing $3 million from the company I built while his father tried to chemically erase my mind. How much I asked, because numbers are easier than emotions. 2.87 million, Saskia said, documented across 43 separate transactions. 43. The same number of actions in the envelope Roland was reading upstairs. "Does he know you found him?" "No," Saskia said. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know this is—" "Don't apologize," I said. "You did exactly what I needed you to do. Thank you." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "What do you want to do?" I looked out my office window at the Lincoln Park street below. December snow falling under streetlights. Christmas decorations on neighboring houses. The world continuing as though mine had not just reorganized itself around a single fact: my own son had been part of the conspiracy to destroy me. "I need time to think," I said. I sat alone in the dark of my office for a very long time after Saskia hung up. I did not cry, did not rage. I simply sat with the weight of understanding that the people I loved most had decided I was worth more erased than present. Then I picked up the phone and called Conrad Morgan, not to cry, not to ask if there was another way. I called to ask one question. "I need to know what adjustments we need to make to the plan," I said when he answered. "My son is part of this." Conrad was quiet for 3 seconds. "All of them," he said. "We adjust all of them." Because Thane was not the only person close to me who had been making plans in secret, there were more betrayals waiting to surface. The first surface came from my daughter standing in a hallway where no one thought to look for witnesses. My youngest daughter stood perfectly still outside her father's study door, and through the gap she heard him say the words that would seal his own destruction. February 2025, 10 months before the Christmas party. Saskia had come to visit me on a Tuesday afternoon, arriving while Roland was supposedly in a board meeting, but his car was in the driveway. His voice carried from the study. She told me later that she almost knocked, almost announced herself. Then she heard her brother's voice and something made her stop, made her listen. After Lenore is in the facility, Roland was saying, voice clear through the partially open door, "You'll step in as CEO, 30% equity. Daria maintains HR oversight to keep the transition smooth. It's clean." Saskia stood in the hallway of her childhood home and heard her father discuss committing her mother to a nursing home like it was a merger negotiation. "What about the timeline?" Thane asked. "My son, 27 years old, voice eager. 6 more months of documentation," Roland said. "Dr. Whitfield won't sign the commitment papers, yet he's being difficult, but we have other options. By summer, she'll be showing enough decline that any physician will confirm incompetence." "And Saskia?" Thane asked. "Saskia told me she held her breath in that moment, waited to hear if her brother would defend her, include her, remember she existed." Roland laughed, actually laughed. "Your sister has nothing to do with the business," he said. "She never has. She's irrelevant." "Irrelevant!" Saskia walked away from that door in complete silence, did not confront them, did not cry. She walked out of the house, got in her car, drove 3 blocks, and called me. "They're planning everything," she said, voice so cold it could have frozen water. "Dad, Thane, and Daria. 30% for Thane. Nothing for me. They said I'm irrelevant." "Where are you?" I asked. "Parked on Burling Street," she said. I needed you to know. They're treating me like I'm invisible." "Good," I said. Silence on the other end. "Good," she repeated. "People who are invisible see everything," I told her. "They just made the biggest mistake they could possibly make. I want you to understand what it means to be called irrelevant by your own father. It doesn't make you invisible, it makes you dangerous. Because irrelevant people have nothing left to lose and everything to prove. They become the ones who work 18-hour days perfecting legal language, who spend 6 weeks on 3 paragraphs, who build weapons so precise they look like protection." 6 months later, Saskia built Section 14. September 2025, 3 months before the Christmas party. I walked into our living room carrying a stack of documents 47 pages thick, bound with a black cover bearing the seal of Morrison and Fletcher law offices. Roland was watching the evening news. Some story about interest rates. His tie was loosened, Owenette draped over the chair-back glass of scotch on the side table. I stood there until he looked up. "What is it?" he asked, not really interested. I let my voice tremble. Carefully. Precisely the right amount of fear mixed with confusion. "Dr. Whitfield suggested I should get a medical power of attorney," I said. Paused. Let my hands shake slightly on the document stack. In case I'm no longer mentally sound, to make things easier for you." I watched his expression shift, the false concern sliding over satisfaction. "Of course, dear," he said, voice gentle in that particular way that sounds like kindness but means control. "Whatever makes you feel secure. Just show me where to sign." I placed the stack on the coffee table in front of him. 47 pages. Saskia and I had spent 3 weeks building it. Estate planning, medical directives, power of attorney documentation. And on page 31, buried in subsection D, paragraph 4, subclause 2, section 14. 3 paragraphs my daughter had spent 6 weeks perfecting. Legal language so dense it read like standard corporate charter amendment. Designed to activate automatically upon documented confirmation of either embezzlement or adultery by any officer holding power of attorney. Designed to invalidate all voting rights. Designed to strip control the moment evidence emerged. Designed to look like nothing at all. "I'm so scared, honey," I said, voice breaking just slightly. Performance art. "I don't want to become a burden." "You could never be a burden." Roland lied, reaching for his pen. The sound of that pen scratching across the signature line was the sound of a man signing away everything he believed he owned. He flipped to the last page, found the signature line, signed his name in the same confident script he had been using for 40 years to sign contracts and close deals and build an empire on my financial rescue plan from 2003. He did not read page 31. He did not read page 30. He did not read anything except the words, "This agreement executed on the final page." "There," he said, handing me back the stack. "All done, feel better." "Yes," I said truthfully, "much better." He turned the television back on, interest rates, market volatility, things he understood. I stood there holding 47 pages that would destroy him, and I thought about February. about Saskia standing in a hallway hearing her father call her irrelevant, about how she had taken that word and transformed it into the most dangerous position anyone could occupy. Invisible, dismissed, underestimated, free to build weapons no one thought to look for. He signed his name, put down the pen, turned the television back on. I picked up those 47 pages, hugged them to my chest, and tried very hard not to smile. On page 31, section 14 waited like a loaded gun. All I needed now was for him to pull the trigger himself. But legal documents were only half the architecture I still needed to build the financial foundation that would make everything else possible. That foundation was built with $214,000 and 11 careful conversations. $214,000 is not a fortune, but invested correctly over 8 months, it can buy exactly what you need control. April 2025. 6 months before the Christmas party. Simone Graves, 55. My divorce attorney and college roommate from 28 years ago sat across from me in a Wicker Park cafe and said what I needed to hear. This is completely legal and it will work. You're offering market value plus 15% premium, she said, reviewing the strategy Saskia and I had outlined on paper. Clean transactions, private sales. No one can claim manipulation. How many do we need? I asked. 11, Saskia said, pulling up her spreadsheet on her laptop. 11 small shareholders holding between 0.8 and 1.3% each, all of them frustrated with Roland's management, all of them responsive to reasonable offers. Simone looked at me over her reading glasses. This will take months, she said. Individual conversations, building trust. You'll need to be patient. I've been patient for 18 months, I said. I can manage 8 more. We started in April. Coffee shops across Chicago, private offices in the Loop, quiet lunch meetings in Evanston and Oak Park. Saskia and I approaching shareholders one at a time, never 2 in the same week, never drawing patterns that Roland's attention might catch. The first was Margaret Brennan, 63, who had inherited shares from her father in 2008 and spent 15 years watching Roland ignore every suggestion she made at annual meetings. You've been with Ashford Realty for 12 years, I told her over coffee at a Lakeview cafe. I know my husband hasn't made that easy. I'm offering market value plus 15%. She signed the transfer agreement before her latte got cold. The second was James Holloway, retired accountant, who had watched Roland's financial reporting get increasingly opaque and had been trying to sell his shares for 3 years. The third was Sarah Mitchell. The fourth was David Carmichael. The 5th through 11th came in succession through May, and into June each one a separate conversation, a separate transaction, a separate piece of the foundation. Saskia texted me updates in careful code. Shareholder 7 accepted. That puts us at 8.3% acquired. 4 more to go. Number 9 signed this morning. We're at 9.7%. Final transaction complete. 11.2% total acquired over 8 months. I need you to understand the mathematics of control. 51% is not just a number. It is the difference between asking permission and making decisions, between being subject to votes and being the vote that matters. I started with 15%, the shares Roland gave me 22 years ago, when we incorporated back when he still believed I had saved the company because that was objectively true. I acquired 11% through 8 months of patient negotiations. And I already had Vera's 25% secretly transferred to me 12 months prior in a transaction Roland never knew happened because he had stopped paying attention to his own mother the same way he stopped paying attention to his wife. 15 plus 11 plus 25 equals 51. Majority control. Acquired completely without Roland's knowledge, while he watched me forget where I put my car keys. On December 18th, 1 week before the Christmas party, Saskia sent the final message. 51.3%. We won before the battle officially began. But winning required more than just acquiring shares. It required making sure Roland never looked for what he couldn't imagine I was capable of hiding. July 2025, 5 months before the party. I was performing my confusion act in the kitchen, dropping things, forgetting things, asking Roland what day it was. I dropped my safe key on the counter, small, black, attached to a red keychain that said private in faded gold lettering. I left it there for approximately 47 seconds before picking it up with exaggerated confusion and putting it in my purse. Roland saw it. I watched his eyes track the key calculate file away. 2 days later, I told him I had a doctor's appointment. Left the house at 9:30 a.m., drove to Starbucks 3 blocks away, and sat there for 2 hours with Saskia monitoring the security camera feed from my office on her laptop. At 10:15 a.m., Roland entered my private office. He walked directly to my desk, opened the bottom drawer, found the key I had left there the night before, deliberately placed, deliberately findable. We watched him kneel on the floor and pull out the small black safe from under my desk. The sound of Roland chuckling at my supposed sentimentality was the sound of a man who had stopped looking for what he could not imagine I was capable of hiding. He opened it with the key. We watched on grainy camera footage as he removed the contents. One birthday card box tied with faded red ribbon. Cards from Thane and Saskia over the years carefully saved. One family photo from the 1990s. All 4 of us at Navy Pier. Thane maybe 8 years old, Saskia maybe 6. Everyone smiling. One white envelope with, "For Lenore with Love 1999, written in Roland's own handwriting from back when he still wrote me love notes. No money, no legal documents, no share certificates, nothing of financial value. Roland looked through everything, chuckled to himself, closed the safe, put it back, left my office. Saskia turned off the laptop feed and looked at me. "He thinks you're keeping birthday cards like treasure," she said. "Good," I said. "Let him think the confused wife locks away sentiment. Let him think that's all I have worth protecting. Because the real safe, the one containing share transfer agreements, Section 14 documentation, Thane's embezzlement evidence, Conrad's hard drive, copies divorce, petition, drafts, and every piece of ammunition we had compiled over 18 months was not in my house. It was at First National Bank Evanston branch in a safe deposit box opened 6 months ago under the name of a consulting company Roland had never heard of. The paperwork was filed under Saskia's signature. The access was restricted to 2 names, mine and hers. My useless daughter, the one Roland said had nothing to do with the business, had opened it. He closed that safe thinking he had caught me at my most vulnerable, keeping old birthday cards and faded photographs like some kind of pathetic treasure. He never thought to ask why the woman who was supposedly losing her memory would remember to lock away sentiment. My real safe is at First National Bank Evanston branch under the name of a company he has never heard of. My useless daughter opened it 6 months ago. But Saskia was not the only ally I had been building in the shadows. There was someone else with her own reasons for wanting to see Daria destroyed. That someone came to me carrying evidence in a manila folder and rage that had been building for 2 years. The woman sitting across from me in the Andersonville Cafe was not someone I had sought out. She had found me, and what she carried in that manila folder would confirm everything I needed to know about the kind of predator my husband had chosen. June 2025, 6 months before the Christmas party, Wednesday morning. The cafe smelled like espresso and cinnamon rolls, bright summer light coming through windows, people working on laptops at nearby tables. Bryn Sutton, 33, social worker specializing in elder fraud cases, sat across from me with the controlled fury of someone who had watched her own parents lose everything to her sister's greed. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, voice quiet but absolutely steady. "I contacted you because I need you to understand who my sister really is." She placed the manila folder on the table between us. "This is 2 years of charity fund embezzlement from your company," she said. $380,000, phantom vendor accounts, fake invoices for corporate giving events that never happened. I'm a social worker. I know how to track financial abuse. This is what Daria does. I opened the folder. Bank statements, transfer records, documentation so thorough it looked like a prosecution file. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Bryn looked at me for a long moment. "Because before she targeted you, she destroyed my parents," she said. "Told them she had an investment opportunity, safe returns, retirement security. They gave her everything, $230,000 they had saved for 45 years. She paused, took a breath. She bought Chanel bags and Louboutin shoes, Bryn continued. A Mercedes. First-class tickets to Paris. When my parents asked for their money back, she told them the investment had failed. Market volatility. Nothing she could do. How old are your parents? I asked. 73, she said. They're working part-time now at a grocery store because their retirement is gone. My father stocks shelves. My mother works the register. I looked at the folder, at the woman across from me who had tracked her own sister's crimes with the precision of someone who understood exactly how predators operate. I'm not here for you, Mrs. Ashford, Bryn said. I'm here for my parents. But I thought you should know you're not her first target. You're just the biggest one. There's a specific kind of person who will destroy everyone close to them and call it ambition. You need to understand that Daria was not my husband's mistake. She was his mirror. Two people who believed other people existed to serve their needs. Two people who saw competence in others as threat rather than resource. Two people who would rather tear down than build. I took the folder. What do you want me to do with this? I asked. Whatever you're planning, Bryn said. I've watched you at company events for 2 years. I've seen you perform confusion while your eyes stayed sharp. I know you're not what they think you are. She stood to leave. When you destroy her, she said, and I know you will, could you make sure my parents know not for revenge, just so they understand they weren't stupid? They were targeted by someone who does this professionally. I will, I said. 6 months later, at 2:47 a.m. on the night after the Christmas party, that folder would become part of the envelope Roland was about to discover in 7 hours. But first, at 2:47 a.m., I needed one more piece of evidence. Lincoln Park Villa bedroom, December 21st, 2025, early Saturday morning. Roland asleep beside me, breathing the deep rhythm of someone who had drunk too much champagne at his own triumph and believed tomorrow would bring more of the same. His phone lit up on the nightstand. I watched the screen glow blue-white in the darkness, saw the message preview appear. Daria, honey. I heard you want to get back together with Lenore. Tell me that's just a rumor. I waited until the screen went dark, waited another 30 seconds to ensure Roland stayed asleep. Then I picked up the phone, unlocked it with the passcode I had watched him enter for 18 months, read the full message. Honey, I heard you want to get back together with Lenore. Tell me that's just a rumor. We've gone too far. Don't let her win. I need you to stick to the plan. The phone screen glowed blue-white in the darkness at exactly 2:47 a.m., and I thought some people are so predictable in their panic, they write their own indictments. Because 2 hours earlier, at exactly 12:47 a.m., my daughter had sent an anonymous text message to this number from a burner phone purchased 3 months ago. The message said, "This is a friend. Roland Ashford is trying to reconcile with his wife. Thought you should know." Saskia and I had calculated that Daria would respond within 2 hours. We had bet on her being awake anxious, checking her phone obsessively after a party where she received an expensive watch in front of witnesses while I received clearance socks. We had bet on her panic making her careless. We had bet on her writing something incriminating. She had provided all three. Don't let her win. I need you to stick to the plan. Written confirmation of conspiracy. Written confirmation of affair. Written confirmation sent at 2:47 a.m., when rational people sleep, but guilty people catastrophize. I took a screenshot, sent it to my own phone from Roland's, deleted the sent message from his phone, deleted the screenshot from his photo gallery. In 7 hours, he would wake up and discover the envelope. In 9 hours and 13 minutes, the banks would freeze his accounts. But right now, at 2:47 a.m., I had everything I needed. I set Roland's phone down in the exact position where I had found it, face down on the nightstand. Then I lay back on my pillow, looked up at the ceiling of the bedroom where we had slept for 19 years, and thought, thank you, Daria. Thank you for being exactly on time. Thank you for being exactly who I knew you were. But the envelope Roland had discovered that morning was only the beginning. Monday at 9 o'clock, the first domino would fall. The first domino fell at exactly 9 o'clock on Monday morning with the sound of a phone call going dead mid-sentence. The clock in our breakfast room read 8:58 on Monday morning when Roland's phone rang, and I watched the last 2 minutes of his old life tick away in silence. December 23rd, 2025, Monday. 2 days after he discovered the envelope. 2 days he had spent making phone calls, consulting lawyers who couldn't see him until after the holidays, leaving increasingly frantic messages for people who had stopped returning them. He was on the phone with his bank when the clock struck 9. "I need to understand what's happening with my accounts," he was saying, voice still attempting confidence. "There seems to be some kind of administrative error." The bank assistant interrupted him. "Mr. Ashford, I'm sorry, but your accounts have been frozen effective 9 a.m. this morning by order of legal counsel. I don't have further information to provide. You'll need to contact ETWE." Roland's face changed, confident to confused in 3 seconds. "Frozen," he said. "What do you mean, frozen all of them?" "All personal accounts, yes, sir. But I have bills. I have who authorized this." "Legal counsel, sir. I can't provide names. You'll need to—" Roland hung up, stared at his phone, called another number. His lawyer, no answer. Called Thane. My son answered on the second ring, voice already panicked. "Dad, what the hell is happening?" "My accounts are frozen, every single one. Someone from the IRS called, saying they're conducting an inspection this morning." "Mine too," Roland said. "Listen, I need you to—" His phone buzzed. Another call. Daria. He switched lines. "Roland, what the hell is happening?" Daria was shouting loud enough I could hear from across the table. "My accounts are frozen too. What did you do? What did that bitch do?" I finished my tea, set the cup down with deliberate care, stood. "Honey," I said, voice soft and slightly confused in the way he had learned to expect. "I'm going to visit Vera. She called this morning wanting to see me." Roland looked up from his phone, face pale, and for one moment I saw him truly see me. Not the confused wife, not the incompetent patient, me, the architect. "You," he said. I picked up my coat from the chair back. "I'll be back later," I said. "Good luck with your calls." I walked out of the breakfast room while behind me Roland's phone rang again, and Daria's voice shouted through the speaker. And somewhere in the city, my son was learning what it means to be part of a conspiracy that has just been exposed. "I want you to understand the specific sound of a plan that has been timed to the minute it is the sound of a phone ringing 11 times with no answer. 10:03 a.m. Ashford Realty offices, 22nd floor reception. The forensic audit team from Meridian Financial Investigations arrived exactly on schedule. 3 senior auditors in dark suits carrying briefcases, engaged by the external legal counsel 3 weeks prior per the timeline I had provided. The referral to federal financial regulators was already in motion. This was simply the first team through the door. Thane was there. Had been there since 8:30, trying to manage what he was beginning to understand was not manageable. Howard Brennan, our chief independent auditor, a man who had watched Roland's financial improprieties accumulate for 3 years while waiting for authorization to act, emerged from his office with the kind of satisfaction that comes from patience finally rewarded. "Gentlemen," he said to the audit team, voice casual like they were old colleagues, "thank you for your punctuality. I've prepared the files you requested. This way, please." Thane stood in reception, watching this exchange, phone in his hand, beginning to understand something fundamental about the world he thought he controlled. He called his father. No answer. Called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. "Dad, pick up," Thane said to the recording. "Dad, I need you here. The IRS just arrived. Dad, please." He hung up, called again. 4th time. 5th. 6th. I was told later by Conrad, who was watching from his office with the door open, that Thane's voice changed with each call. Started confident. Became confused. Became desperate. Became something very close to genuine fear. Because his father was not answering. The man who had promised him 30% equity and CEO position and a future where he would never have to answer to anyone, that man was not answering his phone. 7th call. 8th. 9th. 10th. On the 11th call, Roland answered. Thane said, "Dad, where are you?" "The IRS is here. They're asking about the offshore accounts. They have documentation. Roland hung up. No words, no explanation. Just the click of disconnection and then silence. There is a particular kind of silence that happens when a son realizes his father will let him drown. Thane heard it on that 11th call when the line went dead. Conrad told me Thane stood in that reception area for a full minute afterward, phone still held to his ear, like maybe if he waited long enough his father would call back. Explain. Tell him what to do. Tell him this was all part of the plan. But the phone did not ring. The IRS agents were in the conference room going through files the auditor had prepared. The receptionist was trying very hard to look at her computer screen instead of at the vice president of development, having a very quiet breakdown in the middle of the office. And I was sitting in Vera's Lincoln Park home drinking tea and listening to my mother-in-law explain why she had chosen me over her own son 12 months ago. Thane called his father 11 times from that office reception area while the IRS team waited in the conference room. 11 increasingly desperate voicemails. On the 11th call, Roland answered and hung up without speaking a single word. That was the moment my son understood what I had known. For 18 months, his father would sacrifice anyone to save himself. But while Roland was abandoning his son, I was sitting across from the one person who still believed in protecting family, even when that family didn't deserve it. That person was Vera Morgan Roland's mother, who had made her choice 18 months ago and had been waiting ever since for this day to arrive. Vera Morgan, 75 years old, my husband's mother, placed her hand on mine and said the words that would end her son's life as he knew it. I wanted you to know before this all happened today. We sat in her Lincoln Park home, smaller than ours, elegant in the way that comes from having money long enough to stop needing to prove it. She sat in her armchair with her back perfectly straight despite her age, the same posture I had watched her maintain through 40 years of family dinners and board meetings, and moments when lesser people would have allowed themselves to slouch. Before what happens, I asked, though I knew, had known since she called that morning asking me to visit, she opened the drawer of the antique desk beside her chair, removed an envelope, placed it on the table between us with the kind of deliberate gentleness that comes from handling something that has weight beyond its physical form. I transferred my entire 25% of Ashford Realty to you 12 months ago, she said, voice steady, eyes steady, hands folded in her lap. December 2024. Notarized, legally binding. I did this because I knew Roland would come to this day. I just didn't know when. I looked at the envelope, at the woman who had given birth to my husband 62 years ago and had just given me the weapon to destroy him. When did you know? I asked. She did not hesitate. Since he started changing your prescriptions, she said. Dr. Whitfield called me. Asked if I knew what my son was doing. I told him I didn't. But I suspected. A mother knows when her son has become someone she no longer recognizes. The clock on her mantel ticked. Outside, traffic moved down the street, the world continuing as though we were not sitting in this room discussing how a mother had chosen to protect her daughter-in-law over her own child. I need you to understand what it means. When a mother chooses her daughter-in-law over her own son, it means she has watched that son become someone she can no longer defend, someone who has crossed lines she cannot follow him past. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Because you needed to build your own architecture, Vera said. If I had told you, you might have relied on it too much, might have built your plan around my 25% instead of building something that would work whether I helped or not. This way you built something unbreakable. My shares are just insurance. She poured tea from the pot on the table. Her hands did not shake. Tomorrow there's a shareholder meeting, she said. Roland will try to present a united front, try to manage the situation, try to convince people that everything you've documented is somehow a misunderstanding. I know, I said. He won't succeed, Vera said. Not because of the evidence, because of how you'll present it. You've become very good at precision, Lenore. I stayed with her for another 20 minutes. We did not discuss her son again. We talked about the weather, about her garden, about the book she was reading. Normal conversation between two women who had just redistributed the power structure of a 22-year-old company. When I left, she hugged me at the door. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Not for what I did, but for what he did that made it necessary." 24 hours later, at exactly 10:15 a.m. on Christmas Eve morning, I understood why she had wanted me to know beforehand, why she had needed me to understand that I was not alone, that even Roland's own mother had chosen me. The Ashford Realty Shareholder Meeting Room. Tuesday, December 24th, 10:15 a.m. long wooden table. 12 of the largest shareholders assembled, the ones who held enough equity to matter, the ones whose opinions shaped board votes. Roland sat at the head of the table, attempting the confident posture of a man who still controlled his own company. Daria sat in her usual position as HR director, laptop open, taking notes like this was routine. Thane was not present, still managing the IRS inspection that had now extended into day 2. Roland was mid-presentation about Q4 projections when the door opened. A man entered, neither staff nor shareholder, a face no one at the table recognized. Suit-pressed expression neutral, the professional composure of someone paid to be precisely this invisible. Thomas Reeves' license process server, retained 3 weeks ago through Simone Graves's office, had been waiting in the building's lobby since 9:15 that morning. He walked directly to Roland and Daria, placed 2 white envelopes on the table before them with the deliberate care of someone completing a legal act that cannot be undone. "Mr. Ashford, Miss Sutton," he said quietly, "you've been served." The room went silent. Roland picked up his envelope, opened it. His face changed as he read. Daria opened hers. I watched from my position at the far end of the table as she processed the words, "divorce petition, filed 2 weeks prior, public record as of this morning." "Excuse me for interrupting," the waiter said, voice perfectly calibrated between professional and pointed. "Merry Christmas." He left. The camera in his lapel had recorded everything: Roland's face as he read the papers, Daria's expression as she realized this was happening in front of shareholders, the 12 witnesses who would later testify that, yes, they had seen it happen, yes, at exactly 10:15 a.m. on Christmas Eve. The silence in that boardroom was not polite. It was the silence of 12 people calculating exactly how much power had just shifted hands. Daria looked at the paper in her hand, divorce petition filed 2 weeks prior, public record as of this morning. Then she looked at Roland. Roland did not look back. He was looking at the 12 shareholders sitting around that table. And the 12 shareholders were looking at him with an expression I had never seen them direct at my husband in 22 years, pure, undiluted distrust. But the divorce papers were only the opening move of that meeting. What came next would strip away the last shred of power Roland believed he still held. What came next was the daughter they had spent 26 years calling irrelevant. The boardroom door opened at exactly 11 o'clock, and my youngest daughter walked in, carrying a laptop and a single printed document that would end her father's career. Saskia, 26 years old. The child Roland had told his brother was irrelevant to the business. The daughter who sat silently at family dinners while her father and brother discussed strategy and excluded her from every conversation that mattered. She walked to the head of the table where Roland sat, still holding the divorce papers, placed the printed document in front of him, then turned to address the 12 shareholders directly. "Section 14, page 31, she said, voice clear, no tremor. The voice of someone who had practiced law for 6 years, while her family never once asked what she was working on. If any founding shareholder is found guilty of embezzlement or adultery affecting company reputation, all voting rights are immediately invalidated." She paused. Let the words settle. "You signed this document on September 14th. Dad," she said, looking directly at Roland, "today is the effective date of this clause. Your voting rights no longer exist." The silence in that room was absolute. Roland stared at his daughter like he had never seen her before, which in a way he hadn't. He had seen the quiet girl at the dinner table, the law student he dismissed, the daughter he considered a waste of his time. He had never seen the architect who spent 6 weeks perfecting 3 paragraphs designed to strip him of everything. "Saskia," he said, when did I become a lawyer?" she asked. "6 years ago. When did you last ask about my work? Never." She opened her laptop, turned it to face the shareholders. "This is the adultery confirmation," she said. "Text messages between Roland Ashford and Daria Sutton spanning 3 years, financial transactions showing joint accounts, hotel records, and this," she clicked to the next screen, "is the embezzlement documentation. $2.87 million moved through phantom companies to offshore accounts. One of the shareholders, Margaret Brennan, the woman who had been first to sell me her shares 8 months ago, leaned forward. Section 14 is valid, she asked. Completely, Saskia said. My mother and I filed it with corporate records 3 months ago. Roland signed it without reading it. The document is legally binding. I want you to understand what it looks like when a woman who has been called useless for 26 years stands before the people who dismissed her and dismantles their power with 3 paragraphs she wrote herself. It looks like justice. It looks like patience. It looks like every dinner where she was ignored transforming into fuel for the precision that would destroy them. Roland stood, tried to speak, stopped. Looked at the 12 shareholders who were no longer looking at him with anything resembling respect. This is, he started, over. Saskia finished. Your voting rights are invalidated. Mom now holds 76% of the company through combined shares. You're done. She closed her laptop, picked up her document, walked out of the boardroom without looking back. 3 hours and 30 minutes later, Roland did what men like him always do. When cornered, he sacrificed the person closest to him. Tuesday afternoon, 2:30 p.m., Roland's private office. The 2 corporate fraud investigators from the legal compliance firm sat across from Roland with the practiced neutrality of people who had heard every possible excuse. Thane sat in the adjacent small meeting room, glass partition separating them, thin walls that carried sound better than Roland realized. Mr. Ashford, the lead investigator said, these phantom company transfers total $2.87 million. Your signature appears on the authorization forms. I watched from the hallway, had positioned myself deliberately where Thane could see me if he looked. Roland did not hesitate. Those are forgeries, he said, voice smooth, confident, the voice of a man who had lied his entire life and never been caught. My son had access to my accounts. Check the digital signatures, they'll show his IP address, not mine. Through the glass partition, I watched Thane's face change. Your son, the investigator said. Thane Ashford. Yes, Roland said. I had no knowledge of what he was doing. He's been unstable. I should have intervened sooner, but I wanted to believe in him. There is a specific sound a son makes when he realizes his father would rather destroy him than admit fault. It is the sound of complete silence. Thane sat in that glass room and said nothing, did not call out, did not protest, simply listened to his father construct a narrative where the son was criminal and the father was victim. He signed all the transfer orders. Roland continued, used my credentials without authorization. I've been trying to trace the money for months. I thought I hoped he would come clean on his own. The investigators took notes, asked questions. Roland answered each one with the kind of detail that comes from having planned this contingency, from having always known that if it came down to his son or himself, the choice was obvious. I had predicted this, had told Saskia 18 months ago that Roland would sacrifice Thane the moment it became necessary. She had not believed me at first, had wanted to believe her father capable of at least that much love. But I had known, because I had watched him for 22 years, had seen how he treated everyone in his life as assets to be leveraged or liabilities to be shed. Thane was now a liability. The meeting ended at 3:15 p.m. The investigators left. Roland sat alone in his office. Thane stood up in the glass room, walked to the door, opened it. He looked at his father through that glass partition for a very long time, Then he turned and looked down the hallway where I was standing, watching from a distance I had maintained deliberately. For the first time in years, I saw the son I had known before greed, and his father's promises consumed him, the boy who used to bring me coffee in my office when I worked late before he learned to see me as obstacle rather than mother. He walked toward me, past me, did not speak, did not stop. But while Roland was destroying his relationship with his son, Daria was learning that her position at the company and her freedom were about to evaporate. Daria's evaporation began at exactly 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve with a folder I had been carrying for 6 months. At exactly 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve, I walked into Daria Sutton's office carrying a folder that would end her career in 15 minutes. She looked up from her computer smile, freezing when she saw my expression. "We need to talk about the charity fund," I said, closing the door behind me. Her office was everything mine had never been allowed to be: corner location, floor-to-ceiling windows view of the Chicago River furniture that cost more than most employees made in 6 months. She had decorated it like she planned to stay forever. "I'm sorry," she said, still trying confidence, still believing her position was secure. I placed the folder on her desk, opened it. Bryn's documentation stared up at her in neat columns. $380,000. I said. "Embezzled from corporate charity funds over 3 years. Phantom vendor accounts. Fake invoices for giving events that never happened. Your sister was very thorough in documenting your crimes." The color drained from Daria's face in real time. I watched it happen, confident pink to confused white to genuine fear. She started. "Section 14 is now active," I said, "which means I have authority to terminate any employee involved in activities that damage company reputation. You're fired, effective immediately." Saskia entered then, carrying termination papers and a single additional document. "This is your termination letter," Saskia said, placing them on the desk. "And this is notice to every major real estate firm in the tri-state area. You're blacklisted, permanently." Daria looked at me, at Saskia, back at me. "You can't," she said. I said. "You have 15 minutes to pack your personal belongings. Security will escort you out at 4:15. If you're not packed by then, they'll pack for you." I left her office. Saskia followed. We stood in the hallway and I checked my watch. 14 minutes. Through the glass walls, I watched Daria sit frozen for 37 seconds. Then she started grabbing things from her desk: photos, a coffee mug, the designer bag she bought with my parents-in-law's retirement money. 12 minutes. Colleagues walked past her office, saw her packing, looked away. No one stopped to ask why. No one offered help. They had all seen the divorce papers served that morning, had all watched Saskia strip Roland of his voting rights, had all calculated that Daria was now toxic. 8 minutes. She was crying now, mascara running, hands shaking as she tried to fit her career into a cardboard box that security had delivered. 4 minutes. Security arrived at 4:15 exactly. 2 officers, professional, polite, implacable. They walked her from her corner office, past the cubicles, past the conference rooms, past the people she had worked with for 5 years. 4 minutes and 23 seconds from her office door to the elevator. The elevator numbers descending became hypnotic: 14, 13, 12. Each floor a year of Daria's career dissolving. By the ground floor, she would be nobody. I watched from the executive floor window as security walked her to the street, watched her stand on the sidewalk holding her box, watched her realize she had nowhere to go, no job, no reference, no Roland. His accounts were frozen, his power stripped, his interest in her evaporated the moment she stopped being useful. She had targeted my family, had stolen from elderly people, had helped my husband try to erase my mind. And now she was standing on a Chicago sidewalk on Christmas Eve, holding a cardboard box and understanding what it means to have nothing. Before I tell you what Conrad revealed to me 2 hours later, I need to know your thoughts. Comment below if you think this was justice or if it crossed a line. And please note, some details here are shaped for emotional impact. What matters is the lesson about consequences. 2 hours later, I sat across from Conrad Morgan in a bar 3 blocks from the office. our usual corner booth. Bourbon for him, wine for me. The day winding down into evening Christmas lights blinking in windows across the street. It's done, I said. Daria's blacklisted. Roland stripped of voting rights. Thane's facing investigators. Everything we planned. Conrad nodded, took a sip of his bourbon, then said something I did not expect. I need to tell you something, he said, about the timeline. What about it? I started gathering evidence 14 months ago, he said. Not 18 months, 14. I stared at him. 14 months ago was, I calculated, August 2023, 2 months before Dr. Whitfield showed me the prescription. Yes, Conrad said. He reached into his Owen-it pocket, pulled out a small black USB drive, placed it on the scarred wood table between us. I noticed Roland's patterns changing, he said. The way he talked to you in meetings, the way he dismissed your questions, the way he started having private conversations with Daria that ended when I walked in. So I started copying his hard drive, every week, every file, every email. The USB drive sat between us on the scarred wood table, small, black, unremarkable. Inside 14 months of Roland's arrogance documented one email at a time. When you came to me 18 months ago, Conrad continued, when you told me about the prescription plot, I already had 6 months of evidence compiled. I just didn't know what it was evidence of yet. Your plan didn't start from zero. It started from a foundation I'd already built. I picked up the USB drive, turned it over in my hands. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because you needed to build your own architecture, he said. If you'd known I already had evidence, you might have relied on it too much. Built your case around what I gave you instead of what you discovered yourself. This way you built something unbreakable. My evidence is just insurance. He finished his bourbon. Your husband created his own downfall the moment he underestimated everyone around him. Conrad said, me, you, Saskia, his own mother. He stopped encrypting files because he thought no one was watching, stopped being careful because he thought everyone around him was too stupid or too loyal to act. I drove home through December darkness with Conrad's words echoing in that USB drive in my purse. How many other people had Roland underestimated? How deep did this network of quiet rebellion go? But tomorrow was Christmas Day, and I had one final revelation waiting. The final revelation arrived at my door at 9 o'clock on Christmas morning, and it came in the form of my son kneeling on marble. My son is kneeling on the marble floor of my entry hall, and I feel nothing but the cold weight of what must be done. Christmas Day, Wednesday, December 25th, 2025. The house is quiet. No decorations except the tree in the living room where the envelope had waited 5 days ago. No music, no celebration. Just winter light coming through the tall windows of the grand hall reflecting off marble floors that cost more than most people's cars. Thane arrived at 9 o'clock exactly. I heard his car in the driveway, heard his footsteps on the front walk, heard him pause before knocking. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. My son. 28 years old. The boy I had carried and birthed and raised and loved. He looked 10 years older than he had 6 days ago. Unshaven, eyes red, wearing the same clothes he had worn yesterday when his father threw him to investigators like disposable evidence. Mom, he said, voice breaking on the single syllable. Please, I need to talk to you. I stepped aside, let him enter, closed the door behind him. We stood in the grand hall, the same hall where he had played as a child, where he had brought dates to meet me before prom, where he had told me he was joining the family business, and I had been so proud. You can say what you came to say, I told him. He looked at me, really looked at me. And I saw the moment he understood that the confused, forgetful mother he had been counting on was not standing in front of him, had never been standing in front of him, had been a performance so complete he never questioned it. I'm sorry, he said. 2 words, inadequate, irrelevant. I didn't, he started, stopped, started again. I didn't know it would go this far. Dad said it was just to help you, to make things easier, to protect the company. Stop, I said. He stopped. Then he did something I had not prepared for, something that cracked the careful control I had maintained for 18 months. He dropped to his knees, my son, on the marble floor of his childhood home, hands covering his face, shoulders shaking. "Please, Mom," he said through his hands. "Please withdraw the complaint. I'll do anything. I'll pay it all back. I'll testify against Dad. I'll just please give me a way out of this." I stood there watching him kneel and beg, and I felt the weight of every choice I had made since that afternoon in Dr. Whitfield's office. Every dropped key, every repeated question, every moment of pretending while they plotted my erasure. "I'm begging you," Thane said, looking up at me, face wet, voice raw. "I'm your son." The marble floor was cold enough to bruise knees, cold enough to hold every moment of betrayal pressed into stone, cold enough to hold the weight of 28 years of motherhood, meeting the reality of what that child became when offered 30% equity and his father's approval. "Stand up," I said. He didn't move. "Stand up," I repeated. He stood, slowly, like his knees didn't want to unbend. I walked toward him, stopped when I was close enough to see the boy I had known in the face of the man he had become, close enough to remember every scraped knee I had bandaged, every nightmare I had soothed, every success I had celebrated. I reached out, lifted his chin, forced him to look directly at me. "Look at me, son," I said. He looked. "On the day you agreed to swap my medicine to make me mentally ill," I said, voice steady and cold and absolutely clear, "you erased your name from my life." I let go of his chin, stepped back. "The man I raised would never have done what you did," I continued, "would never have chosen money over his mother's mind, would never have conspired to make me incompetent so he could steal what I built. That man died somewhere in the last 3 years. I don't know who you are anymore." Thane stood there, silent, tears still running down his face but no sound. "Have your lawyer call my lawyer," I said. That was all. No screaming, no rage, just 6 words and the end of everything. He turned toward the door, stopped, turned back. "Mom," he started. "No," I said. "There's nothing else. You made your choice. Now live with it." He left, opened the door himself, walked out into Christmas morning without looking back. I closed the door, stood with my back pressed against the solid wood for exactly 1 minute. 60 seconds of feeling the door against my spine, the only thing holding me upright. The wood was cold, solid, real. Unlike everything else that had dissolved over the past 18 months, trust, family, the belief that the people you love will choose you over money. Then I walked to the kitchen, made coffee with mechanical precision, water, filter, grounds, button, the ritual of normalcy masking the fact that I had just severed my relationship with my own child. The coffee tasted like ash, but I drank it anyway because this is what survival looks like now. Because at 2 o'clock I had a board meeting where I would reveal the 51% control Roland still didn't know I possessed. Because justice has a price, and I was paying it 1 sip of bitter coffee at a time. I pulled out the documents Saskia had prepared. Voting share documentation, Section 14 activation records, the timeline of everything that would happen next. At 2 p.m., I had entered that board meeting with 51% control they did not expect me to hold. The shareholders had seen the final evidence. The power structure had been formalized. Roland had understood finally and completely that he had lost everything. But today, Christmas Day, I had buried my son while he still breathes, had chosen justice over motherhood, had become the kind of person who can watch their child kneel and beg and say no. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, set it in the sink. Outside, Christmas afternoon was settling into early dark. Somewhere in this city, a man who used to be my husband was learning the precise weight of consequence. I had nothing left to plan, only left to carry. The boardroom on the 22nd floor smells like expensive leather and Roland's desperation. I arrive at 1:58 p.m., 2 minutes early, a lifetime of punctuality I cannot shed even now. Through the glass walls, I see Roland at the head of the table, gesturing with the confident authority of a man who believes he still controls the narrative. 5 board members sit in their usual positions, notepads, open faces, carefully neutral. But as I enter, something shifts. Roland's voice falters mid-sentence. Every head turns toward me. Lenore. Roland stands smoothing his tie with fingers that tremble slightly. I wasn't certain you'd join us, given the circumstances. The circumstances, I repeat softly, taking my seat not at the far end where I've sat for 15 years, but in the chair directly opposite him. You mean the circumstances where you and our son conspired to incapacitate me through systematic medication, tampering. Silence drops like a guillotine blade. Howard Brennan, our chief auditor, 63, gray-bearded, known for his poker face during financial crises, clears his throat. Mrs. Ashford, perhaps we should address the immediate crisis first. Roland was just presenting a resolution plan for the board's consideration. I opened my leather portfolio, removing nothing yet. By all means, continue Roland. He does, and here's what chills me. He's good. 18 months of planning, of suffering, of strategic acquisition, and he stands there spinning a narrative so reasonable, so measured that I watch 2 board members actually nod along. He talks about unfortunate misunderstandings and family stress and the need for steady leadership during this transition period. He proposes a temporary leave of absence for me, medical evaluation, rest. He's packaging my imprisonment as corporate wellness policy. The company requires stability. Roland concludes placing both palms flat on the mahogany table. I've served as chairman for 15 years. I'm asking the board to reaffirm that leadership today. Marcus Caldwell, our longest-serving independent director, shifts in his seat. Roland raises valid points about continuity. I let the silence stretch for 3 heartbeats. Then I place the first document on the table, the share transfer agreements. 15 separate acquisitions executed through Conrad Morgan over 18 months. Whistler Holdings, Penumbra Capital, 13 others. I control 51% of Ashford Realty Group, I say quietly. I have controlled it since last Tuesday when the final transfer was registered. This meeting isn't a discussion, Roland. It's a notification. The color drains from his face so completely that for a moment I think he might collapse. He stops, recalculates, starts again. Even if that were true, a hostile takeover of this nature requires nothing, I interrupt. It requires nothing but money and patience. I had both. Howard Brennan pulls the documents toward him, scanning the registration dates with the practiced eye of a man who has audited Fortune 500 companies for 4 decades. His expression doesn't change, but his hand's still on the paper. These appear legitimate, he says finally. Roland's voice rises. You can't do this. I built this company from my father's foundation, I finish, using my family's capital, sitting in my family's chairman's seat. And you're correct that you built something, Roland. You built a conspiracy to destroy me. I'm reaching for the second folder, the medical evidence, the recorded conversations, the irrefutable proof when the boardroom door opens. Her voice could cut diamonds. The paperwork was executed this morning. My attorney is filing it now. The room stops breathing. Roland stares at her like she's speaking a language he's never heard. Mother, what are you? 25%. Marcus Caldwell says, slowly doing the mathematics that will reshape everything. Plus Lenore's 51%. That's 76%. I finish. The number sits in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Vera finally turns to Roland. You drugged your wife. You conspired to have her declared incompetent. You attempted to steal an empire that was never yours. Each sentence lands like a physical blow. I raised you better than this, but I'm your son. And she, Vera gestures to me without breaking eye contact with Roland, is an Ashford. That name meant something before you tried to destroy it from within. Howard Brennan stands, and the formality of the gesture signals what comes next. Given the new ownership structure, I move that this board vote on the removal of Roland Ashford as chairman and CEO effective immediately. Second, says Marcus Caldwell quietly. The vote takes 45 seconds. 5 hands rise. Not one of them hesitates. Roland stands there, swaying slightly as if the floor has tilted beneath him. He looks at each board member in turn, perhaps searching for an ally who no longer exists. Then he looks at me. I hold his gaze. I let him see everything the nights I pretended to take the pills, the months of careful planning, the cold arithmetic of revenge perfectly executed. "Lenore," he says, "just my name, nothing else." I don't respond. After 18 months of preparation, after severing ties with my son this morning, after building this trap, brick by careful brick, I have nothing left to say to the man who tried to bury me. Roland walks toward the door. His footsteps on the marble floor sound like a funeral march. He passes within 3 feet of me. He doesn't look back. I watch him disappear down the hallway, this man I married 36 years ago, and feel nothing. No triumph, no grief. Just the hollow certainty that I've won a war that should never have been fought. I move to the chairman's seat, the leather still warm from where Roland sat, and face the board that is now unquestionably mine. But as Vera gathers her briefcase to leave, I finally understand she didn't come here to save her son. She came to save the Ashford name, and in her calculation, I was always the safer bet. I return to the Lincoln Park villa as darkness settles, and I finally understand Vera's calculation. She didn't save me. She saved the Ashford name from the men who would destroy it. I was simply the better custodian. My daughter asked me the question I've been avoiding for 18 months. Why did you wait? Saskia calls at 8 o'clock on Christmas evening. I'm in my private office on the 3rd floor watching snow begin to fall over the park. "Mom, are you okay? Today was brutal." I finish. "I told Thane he's no longer my son. I watched the board remove your father as chairman. Yes, it was brutal." Silence. Then, "Mom, why didn't you divorce sooner? 18 months ago when you knew everything." I set down the glass of scotch I've been holding but not drinking. The question hangs between us, and I realize I've never answered it. Not to Conrad, not to myself. "Why do you think I waited?" I ask quietly. "I thought you needed time to gather evidence, or protect the company, or—" She stops. "I don't know, Mom. That's why I'm asking." I watch the snow fall for 3 heartbeats. Then I speak the truth for the first time. Because I needed him to spend all his personal money first. The words land like stones in still water. "What?" I discovered everything in June of 2024. The affair, the medication tampering, Thane's involvement. I could have filed for divorce the next day. "But you didn't." But I didn't. Because timing isn't just about when you strike, it's about what your opponent has left when you do. I hear Saskia breathing. Conrad tracked every transaction. The $18,000 diamond ring he slid onto her finger at our Christmas party. A Patek Philippe watch worth $22,000 he bought her the summer prior June when he thought his plan was working and celebration felt appropriate. The Tesla Model S he registered in her name. 3 European trips, Paris, twice Rome, once totaling $45,000, $80,000 remodeling her condo. The numbers roll off my tongue like a prayer memorized through repetition. He bankrupted himself for her, I continue. I didn't have to take anything. He gave it all away. Revenge is not a single blow, but compound interest, 18 months of his spending calculated against my silence. The joint assets remained untouched, I explain. The house, the investment accounts, my trust fund, the company shares. Everything we built together sat in legal structures he couldn't drain without my signature. So while I acquired 51% of Ashford Global through shell companies, he liquidated personal bonds, cashed out retirement accounts, sold the vintage Porsche. His father left him all to keep Daria comfortable. Mom, Saskia says, and I can't tell if it's admiration or horror. By the time I filed, he'd spent nearly everything he had in his name. On her. The irony is almost perfect. He used his own fortune to fund his attempt to steal mine, and left himself nothing when the attempt failed. I pick up the Scotch watch at Catch the Lamplight. You've been planning this down to the dollar, Saskia says softly. Down to the dollar. Conrad's forensic accounting showed exactly when Roland would hit his personal financial floor. We timed everything for the same week. Maximum impact. Minimum recovery time. The snow blankets Lincoln Park in white that looks clean from this distance. Saskia asks one more question. Is there anything left? No, I say. There's nothing left. But I'm wrong. There's one thing left. At 11:45 on New Year's Eve, Roland receives the legal eviction notice from the Lincoln Park mansion. The house was transferred to a trust in Saskia's name 3 months ago during the refinancing. Roland signed the papers without reading them. He never read the papers. I'm not there to see it. I'm already at the Door County vacation home 3 hours north, watching different snowfall on a different lake. Conrad texts me at 11:58 with a single photograph Roland standing on the front steps with a small suitcase looking at the house, like he's trying to remember what it meant when it was his. At midnight, Chicago's fireworks welcome 2026. Roland stands outside the house he's lost with no cash frozen by court order, no equity transferred to trusts, no Daria disappeared after being fired, and no Thane facing embezzlement charges. The new year begins for him from absolute zero. The snow falls like it doesn't know what happened here, and I realize I've become the kind of person who watches beauty and feels arithmetic. On the morning of January 1st, I sit on the Door County porch with champagne and crystal, watching snow fall on the frozen lake. The temperature is 18 degrees. The champagne should taste like victory. It tastes like water. Howard Brennan calls at 9 o'clock our chief auditor working New Year's Day because I'm paying triple overtime. He confirms the eviction was executed without incident. Roland left the keys on the entryway table. Took nothing that wasn't already his, which means he took almost nothing. "It's done," Howard says. "Thank you," I reply and end the call. The snow continues. I should feel something. Triumph, relief, the satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly across 18 months. I feel nothing. I've felt enough. The champagne grows warm in my hand. The lake stays frozen. Somewhere 3 hours south, Roland is waking up in whatever hotel room he could afford with the credit card that hasn't been frozen, yet realizing that the life he knew ended at midnight while fireworks celebrated a future he won't share. And I sit here having won everything I planned to win and discover that total victory tastes like nothing at all. The numbness lasted 3 months and 17 days. Then it cracked. 4 months after Christmas, I sit in the back row of a federal courthouse watching my son learn what consequences look like. Judge Helena Whitmore, 56 silver hair pulled back in a bun that could cut glass 23 years on the federal bench, sits elevated above us in courtroom 4B. She's known for measured sentences and zero tolerance for financial crimes committed by those who should know better. Thane stands before her in a navy suit that probably cost more than most people make in a month, his attorney beside him looking appropriately grave. "Mr. Ashford." Judge Whitmore says, and her voice carries the weight of institutional authority that cannot be negotiated with or charmed. "You are hereby sentenced to 18 months probation, 500 hours of community service, and full restitution of $2.87 million. The number hangs in the air. Everything Thane embezzled from Ashford Realty, now a legal debt he'll spend years repaying. This court hopes you understand the severity of violating the trust placed in you. She continues, "You held a position of responsibility in your family's company. You exploited that position for personal gain. The criminal record you now carry will follow you for the rest of your professional life." And there it is. Not the probation or the community service, those are temporary inconveniences, but the permanent record, the closed doors, the business world Thane was born into now watching him from the outside. I sit in the back row, hands folded in my lap, watching my son's future contract to a single point of accountability. The judge dismisses the court. People stand gathering papers and briefcases. Thane turns to leave with his attorney, and that's when he sees me. Our eyes meet across 30 feet of federal courtroom. I watch him process my presence, surprise, then something that might be shame or grief or both. He stops walking. His attorney notices, follows his gaze to where I sit, then tactfully steps aside. For a long moment, mother and son look at each other across the distance we've built. I don't smile. I don't frown. I simply hold his gaze and let him see me seeing him. This man who was once my boy who made choices that erased his name from my life. Then I nod, just once, slight. Not forgiveness, not coldness. Acknowledgement. I see you. I knew who you were before you became this. Thane's throat works. He nods back just as slight, just as weighted with everything we'll never say to each other again. Then he turns and walks out of the courtroom, and I let him go. How do you forgive someone who was never yours to begin with, who became a stranger wearing your son's face? I sit there for 5 more minutes after everyone else has left in the empty courtroom that smells like old wood and broken promises, and I think about what motherhood means when the child you raised grows into someone you can't recognize. Then I stand, collect my coat, and leave the federal courthouse for the last time. That afternoon at 2:30, I meet Bryn Sutton at a small cafe in Andersonville, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and coffee that actually tastes like something. We chose it because neither of us has history here, neutral ground for what we both know is our final conversation. Bryn looks tired. Not sleepless tired, but the deeper exhaustion that comes from carrying difficult knowledge too long. The coffee sits between us, growing cold untouched. There's something you need to know about my sister, Bryn says finally, about how this started. I wait. I came to you 6 months before Christmas for a reason, she continues. Not just because I suspected what Daria was doing, but because I discovered something about when she started planning it. A chill runs through me that has nothing to do with the April wind outside. What do you mean when she started planning it? Bryn reaches into her bag and pulls out a small notebook. She opens it to a page marked with a yellow tab. I found this in Daria's apartment 3 weeks after Christmas when I was helping her pack, before she disappeared. She slides the notebook across the table. Page 17. I look down. It's a list of names written in neat handwriting, 12 names total. 7 have lines drawn through them. My name is number 8. No line through it, just my name with a date beside it, April 2024. 2 months before Roland's affair began. So, before I knew it was happening, I say slowly, she already knew who I was. That's right, Bryn says, but she didn't know who you were. I look up at her. She had a list. You were on it. She studied you before you ever met her. Your marriage, your finances, your company structure, your vulnerabilities, Roland's ego, Thane's ambition. She researched it all before she ever walked into Ashford Realty. The cafe suddenly feels smaller, the walls closer, the 7 names with lines through them. Bryn continues, her voice quiet and precise. Those were previous targets, other wealthy families, other careful extractions of money and influence. My sister wasn't an opportunist, Lenore. She was a systematic predator. I stare at the notebook at my name written in someone else's handwriting months before I ever knew danger was coming. That's why I approached you when I did, Bryn says. When I found her research on you, I knew she was planning something bigger than before. I just didn't know how deep it would go. I push the notebook back across the table. Thank you for telling me, I say, and my voice sounds distant even to myself. We sit in silence for another moment. Then Bryn gathers the notebook, her coat, and stands. I'm sorry, she says, for all of it. I nod. She leaves. I drive home through Chicago streets that look the same as they always have, but everything feels different now. I was fighting a war I couldn't see, dodging bullets in the dark, and I survived by accident more than design. For 18 months, I thought I was executing a strategic plan, acquiring shares, building evidence, timing the revelation. But from Daria's perspective, I was a target moving unexpectedly a mark who somehow sensed danger and started building defenses before the attack even began. She moved pieces before I knew the board existed. The medication tampering, Roland's seduction, Thane's recruitment, all calculated from a list made in April of 2024. I came home that day and looked back on the entire 18 months from her perspective. We had been fighting each other even before I knew the battle had begun. I won because I didn't know I was losing. Winning by accident doesn't feel like winning. It feels like waking up after surgery and discovering they removed something you didn't know was killing you. I spent 2 months learning to live with that knowledge. Then Roland arrived. 6 months after everything ended, my husband arrives at my cabin door looking like a man who's forgotten how to be powerful. It's Wednesday afternoon in June, and I'm reading on the porch overlooking the lake when a taxi pulls up the gravel drive. Not the Mercedes, not any car at all. A taxi. Roland gets out, slowly pays the driver with cash counted carefully from a worn wallet. He's lost weight. His suit, still expensive, still tailored, hangs differently on his frame like it was made for a man who no longer exists. His hair has gone almost completely gray in 6 months. He looks 10 years older than he did at Christmas. He stands at the bottom of the porch steps for a long moment, looking up at me. I close my book, but don't stand. "Lenore," he says. "Roland," I reply. His throat works. "I need to talk to you." I should feel something. Triumph, maybe. Or vindication. Or even the satisfaction of seeing my strategy's final outcome standing before me diminished and aging rapidly. I feel nothing. Again. "You have 30 minutes, I say." I don't invite him inside. That boundary stays intact, but I gesture to the guest chair on the porch, the one I've never offered to anyone before because this has always been my solitary space. "Thank you," he says, and climbs the steps carefully like his knees hurt. He sits. I sit. Between us, 6 months of devastation, 18 months of strategy, 36 years since we first met, 22 years of marriage that meant something before it meant nothing. The lake stretches out before us, blue and indifferent, under June's sun. "I'm not here to ask for anything," Roland begins. "Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not money." "Good, Yao," I say, "because I don't have any of those things to give you." He nods like he expected that. "I just needed to say some things, while I still can, before I leave Chicago." "You're leaving next month, taking a job in Kansas City, middle management at a consulting firm, 58 years old and starting over as someone's assistant." He says it without bitterness, just stating facts. It's what I have left. The lake moves like it knows nothing of what humans do to each other, and I envy its indifference. "Say what you came to say," I tell him. Roland looks at his hands, the hands that signed eviction notices and medication orders and share transfer agreements he never read. "I knew you were faking the memory loss. I knew, and I kept going anyway." I don't respond. This isn't news, but hearing him admit it feels different than knowing it alone. "The medication plan was wrong," he continues. "Not just illegal, wrong, morally wrong. I knew that too, but I thought—" He stops, starts again. "I thought being chairman meant I could do anything. That power would protect me from consequences, that the rules were different for men like me." "They're not," I say quietly. "No," he agrees. "They're not." He talks for 10 more minutes, not making excuses, not defending himself, just speaking truth because he has nothing left to lose. He admits he saw Daria's manipulation, but let it happen because it served him. Admits he recruited Thane because it was easier than facing me alone. Admits he spent his personal fortune on someone who disappeared the moment his power did. I listen without interrupting, watching the man I married 36 years ago dissolve into someone I've never met, someone capable of honesty only after destruction. When he finishes, silence settles between us. A bird calls from somewhere across the water. The sun moves lower, painting everything gold. Then I ask the question that's haunted me since Christmas. Why not Daria? Not the money, not the power. Why betray the foundation itself? Long silence. Roland looks at the lake, then at his hands, then back at the lake. His jaw works like he's chewing words he doesn't want to swallow. Finally, because I'm afraid. Afraid of what? He turns to look at me directly for the first time since sitting down. His eyes are wet. Afraid of you. Afraid you're better than me, and someday everyone will realize it, including me. The words hang in June air between us. You were always smarter. He continues, and his voice cracks slightly. Always more strategic. Always saw 3 moves ahead while I was still trying to understand the current play. Your father knew it. The board knew it. I knew it. So you tried to destroy me, I say slowly, because you were afraid I was better than you. Yes. The admission comes out like a confession. Not because I hated you, not because I didn't love you once, but because living next to someone who's better than you, watching them be better knowing they're better, it erodes something. Every day a little more, until you're just afraid all the time. I sit with that answer. Really sit with it. Let it settle into the spaces where anger used to live. Fear. Not indifference, not cruelty, just fear eating him from the inside until he became someone who could drug his wife and feel justified. Truth without forgiveness feels like surgery, without anesthetic necessary, clean and quietly devastating. The sun drops lower. Our 30 minutes are almost gone. I watch the water move, thinking about 18 months of strategy that I thought was brilliant, but was really just survival instinct against a predator I couldn't see. Thinking about victory that tastes like nothing. Thinking about a man who destroyed himself because he was afraid of being less. Then I speak with clarity that carries no malice, no triumph, no cruelty. Just truth meeting truth on a porch in Wisconsin. You're right, I say. I'm better than you. Roland flinches but doesn't look away. But that was never a reason for you to do what you did. I continue. Being less than someone isn't a justification for trying to destroy them. It's just being human. We're all less than someone. He nods slowly like he expected nothing less from me. The 30 minutes are gone. Roland stands and I don't stop him. Thank you, he says, for listening. I nod once. He walks down the porch steps, down the gravel drive to where the taxi still waits. He doesn't look back. I sit alone on the porch as the sun sets, wondering if honesty this late counts as courage or just the luxury of having nothing left to lose. Maybe it doesn't matter which one it is. Maybe honesty at the end is just honesty stripped of everything but itself. Before he leaves, Roland stops at the porch steps and asks about the smile I gave him on Christmas Eve, the one detail that's haunted him more than all the rest. Evening light falls across the porch in gold and amber. Roland stands with one hand on the railing looking back at me. I want to ask something, he says. That Christmas Eve, when you received those gloves from me, you smiled. I've thought about that smile every day since. I don't understand it. I remember the moment perfectly. The newspaper-wrapped package, the $6.99 gloves inside, the certainty in his eyes that he'd already won. What don't you understand, I ask? Why you smiled. If you knew everything, the affair, the medication, the plan, why smile at gloves that cost less than $10? I look out at the lake watching light move across water. Then I look back at this man who drugged me, betrayed me, tried to destroy me, and who is now asking about a smile because it's the one thing he couldn't calculate. It was the smile of someone who has set a trap and seen prey walk in, I say simply. Roland goes very still. Those gloves told me everything I needed to know about how safe you thought you were, about your contempt, your carelessness, your absolute certainty that you'd already won. I set down my water glass. You gave me clearance gloves while planning to have me declared incompetent, while an $18,000 diamond ring sat on your mistress's finger, purchased on my own credit card. The disproportion was almost perfect. So you smiled because it confirmed everything. I finish. Every suspicion, every fear, every piece of evidence I'd been gathering for 6 months. You handed me your hubris wrapped in discount store packaging, and I smiled because I knew exactly what it meant. Roland's face does something complicated. Recognition, regret something that might be respect arriving 2 years too late. I thought you smiled because you were grateful, he says quietly, or because you'd actually lost enough cognitive function to find joy in small things. I never imagined you were 3 moves ahead the entire time. 5 moves, I correct gently. I was 5 moves ahead. He laughs once a sound with no humor in it, just acknowledgement of defeat so complete it's become philosophical. Then he says something I don't expect. You deserve admiration rather than fear. I made the wrong choice. Not apology, not excuse, just acknowledgement, truth meeting truth one final time. I nod once. He nods back. Roland walks down the porch steps, carefully crosses the gravel drive to where the taxi has been waiting. He gets into the back seat. The door closes with a soft thunk that carries across evening air. I watch the taxi pull away down the gravel drive, watch it turn onto the country road, watch the red taillights grow smaller until the trees swallow them completely. The taxi's red taillights disappear behind trees, and I realize I'm not watching an enemy leave. I'm watching a stranger who used to be my husband fade into someone else's story. The sun sets fully. June darkness settles over Wisconsin. I sit alone on the porch with only the lake sounds and evening birds for company. I should feel something. Closure, maybe, or satisfaction, or even grief for what we were before we became this. I feel tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying strategic weight for so long that you've forgotten what your natural posture looks like. At 7:30, my phone rings. Saskia. "Mom, are you sitting down?" "I'm always sitting down lately," I say. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I'm at the office going to be here until 9 working on restructuring plans, and I wanted to run something by you." Her voice has an energy I recognize. It's the voice I had 22 years ago before the creditors' meeting when building something felt like possibility instead of defense. "I'm listening," I say. "New leadership team, new strategy, new direction. We're rebuilding Ashford Realty from the foundation up, and I wanted to ask..." She pauses. "Mom, would you like to join, not full-time, just consultant? Help me build this right." I look out at the lake, dark now except where moonlight catches the water. "Let me think," I say. "How long?" "Until this glass of wine is finished." Saskia laughs. The sound is bright and genuine, cutting through 6 months of strategic silence and calculated victories. And then I laugh too. The laugh surprises me. I'd forgotten what my own joy sounds like. It's not the laugh I used at board meetings or charity dinners, not the carefully calibrated laugh designed to put people at ease. This is something unplanned and honest, rising up from some part of me that survived the 18-month war intact. The sound carries across the lake, and I hear it echo back like the water is laughing with me. "Mom," Saskia says, still laughing, "are you okay?" "Yes," I say, and realize I mean it. "Yes, I am." We talk for another 10 minutes about nothing important. Office renovations, new hires, whether the Door County weather is better than Chicago's. The kind of conversation that means everything because it means nothing, just a mother and daughter talking on a June evening. After we hang up, I sit with the wine glass in my hand, watching June darkness settle completely over Wisconsin. The glass is still half full, but I'm not thinking about the wine anymore. I'm thinking about Monday mornings, about coffee made without assistance, about building something worth protecting instead of protecting something already broken. I'm thinking about admiration instead of fear. I finish the wine, slowly savoring the last swallow. Then I pick up my phone and call Saskia back. She answers on the first ring. That was fast. "Okay," I say. "I'll join as consultant, but one condition." "Name it." "Your Monday morning coffee must be made by yourself. Not assistant, not intern, not office manager. Yourself." Saskia laughs again, and this time I'm ready for my own laughter that follows. "Deal," she says. "Partnership built on self-reliance. Partnership built on mutual respect," I reply. "Self-reliance just makes better coffee." We hang up. The lake moves in darkness. Tomorrow begins not with revenge or strategy, but with the simple work of building something worth protecting. 6 months after the last domino fell, I learn what it means to live without a strategy. It's a Tuesday morning in December, my first winter at the Door County cabin, without a timeline pinned to the inside of my desk drawer. No scheduled calls with Conrad, no acquisition targets, no sequence of moves mapped 3 months in advance. Just coffee, a wool blanket, and Green Bay moving under gray December light in patterns that follow no logic I can plan around. Saskia called last night to say the Q4 numbers came in strong. I said good and meant it simply without calculating what it meant for leverage or position. That is new. That is something I am still learning. I have been here 6 months and I still catch myself reaching for the yellow legal pads. The habit of planning doesn't dissolve just because the war is over. I find myself drafting moves for problems that no longer exist, then setting the pad down and watching the water instead. The water never plans. It just moves. I think about what I told Roland on this porch in June, that being less than someone is not justification for destroying them. I meant it for him. Now I find I have to mean it for myself. In reverse, being more than someone is not justification for becoming only the part of you that fights. I was very good at the fight. I am learning to be good at the quiet. There is a clematis vine I planted along the cabin fence last September. Nothing dramatic, just a plant I like the shape of at the nursery in Sturgeon Bay. It has no strategic purpose. It will bloom next June whether anyone is here to see it or not. I planted it on a Saturday afternoon with soil under my fingernails and no plan beyond that single afternoon. That, I think, is the real ending. Not the board vote, not Roland in the taxi, not the eviction notice at midnight. The ending is a Tuesday morning with ordinary coffee and a vine growing slowly along a fence because I liked the look of it, because I decided it was enough reason, because no one had to agree. 60 years old and I am finally planting things just for the spring. And to you, listening to my story, remember this revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about reclaiming what was always yours. Looking back now, I see where I went wrong. I spent 22 years planting flowers for others to admire instead of planting for myself. I waited for recognition that should have come from within. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait for someone else to validate your worth before you start defending it. The moment you realize you're being betrayed is the moment you begin planning your survival, not your performance. What I learned from these revenge cheating stories, my own and others, is that patience isn't weakness. In true family stories like mine, the deepest betrayals come from those closest to you. But that doesn't mean you've lost. It means you've been given clarity. I believe God put me through this test to remember who I was before I learned to shrink myself. These revenge cheating stories teach us that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous, not because they're cruel, but because they're calculating. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had to choose between justice and forgiveness? These true family stories remind us we're not alone. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more true family stories about finding strength when everything falls apart, subscribe to Her Vengeance. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your presence here truly matters. As a reminder, some details in this story have been fictionalized for narrative and reflection purposes. What I hope you take with you is the lesson: plant flowers for yourself. God bless you.